This episode addresses common legal questions that come up for charitable relief for victims in the immediate aftermath of disasters: earthquakes, hurricanes, wildfires, pandemics, terrorist attacks, wars. Generous Americans look for immediate ways to create new organizations or programs to support those affected by either fundraising or by direct service, financial, or material support. The focus of this episode is on distinguishing between charitable disaster relief for a charitable class as compared to private gifts to a specific individual. The focus of today's episode is on when and how to launch the relief effort for a charitable class that can be funded from a charity or a foundation. Welcome to the EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource, brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Farella, Braun & Martel. My name is Cynthia Rowland, and I'm a partner at Farella. I'm a business and tax lawyer with more than 30 years of experience advising clients on nonprofit and charity law. Through this podcast, our lawyers and guests will discuss a range of legal and business issues impacting the nonprofit world because we understand you work hard every day to make your community a better place to live and do business. Many of our programs focus on the basics, and at times we'll do a deep dive into narrow and complicated legal issues. Again, welcome to the EO Radio Show. We're glad you're here. There are many existing disaster relief organizations operating throughout the world, and most community foundations also have existing programs to help both locally throughout the U.S. and in some cases throughout the world to provide financial resources to those in the best position to help a community recover from a disaster. Also, many charities that are formed for one purpose, say environmental purposes in a particular community, are permitted to expand their purpose to disaster relief, so it may be quite appropriate for an organization to add a disaster relief program to respond quickly without the need to create a whole new charity. Working with an existing organization avoids all the expense and time involved in creating a new organization. The existing organization, of course, may need to account for disaster relief donations separately and may need to report the new program on its tax return for the year. But by comparison to creating an entirely new entity, this can be the most effective in many circumstances. So let's think about creating a new program, whether within an existing charity or as a whole new organization. There is a threshold question that needs to be addressed before starting the new program. That question is whether the effort serves a charitable class as compared to an effort to help a specific individual or group of individuals. Fundamental to tax exemption and the ability to raise charitable contributions that are deductible for the donors is the requirement that the effort must serve a charitable class. Setting up financial support for a specific individual or specific group of individuals is a wonderful thing to do, but that doesn't qualify as a charitable activity for purposes of 501c3 or deductions for the donors. While the donated amount is generally a non-taxable gift when given to a specific individual, and a great thing to do, the organizers of the effort can't get tax-exempt status for the organization created to provide specific support to a specific individual or group of individuals. The IRS has an excellent publication on its website that covers disaster relief topics. See the show notes for a link. It's labeled as IRS Publication 3833. In that publication, the IRS gives an excellent example of the distinction between relief for an individual, which is not a charitable purpose, as compared to setting up an organization or program that does serve a charitable class. So here's the IRS example. Linda's baby, Todd, suffers severe burns in a fire requiring costly treatment that Linda cannot afford. Her friends and coworkers form the Todd Foundation to raise funds from fellow workers, family members, and the general public to meet the baby's expenses. Because the organization is formed to assist a particular individual, it would not qualify as a charity. But consider this alternative case. Linda's friends and coworkers form a new organization to raise funds to meet the expenses of an open-ended group consisting of all children in the community injured by disasters where financial help is needed. Neither Linda nor members of Linda's family control the new charity. The new charity controls the selection of aid recipients and determines whether any assistance should be provided to Todd. Potential donors are advised that funds may be used to assist Todd. Their contributions might well be used for other children who have similar needs. This new charity does not accept contributions specifically earmarked for Todd or any other individual. So in the example, this new charity formed and operated to assist an indefinite number of current and future disaster victims will qualify as a charity under 501c3. So if the goal is to direct financial support to a particular individual, an injured baby, a cancer patient, the victims of a mass shooting, crowdfunding sites can be used quite effectively. Although the contributions aren't tax deductible to the donors, the recipient isn't taxed on the gift, and the funds can arrive quickly. But it's not a charitable effort. It's organized giving for a particular individual. Wonderful to do, but not supported by tax deductions. So thinking about the charity that is formed for disaster relief, the charity that makes contributions to the charitable class should have in place procedures so that the selection committee or staff processing applications for the disaster relief can properly decide which victims should receive the grant funds. The rules are very clear that charitable funds cannot be distributed to individuals merely because they're victims of the disaster. There needs to be an objective evaluation of need. While the rules are more flexible in immediate aftermath of the disaster, for example, providing transportation off the island hit by a hurricane during the hurricane is fine. There's no need to check whether the victims have the funds to charter their own boat, but the provision of long-term support, such as rental assistance for wildfire victims who've lost their homes, that long-term support has to be made based on the application of objective criteria to show that there is, in fact, a financial hardship being met by the charitable gift. Some additional issues come up when there are local company foundations that wish to provide disaster relief. Many businesses have philanthropic foundations that are funded by contributions from the company and its founders. These company foundations are private foundations, and they often wish to adopt plans for disaster assistance to employees and their families. But the start of these programs is often generated by a specific disaster. An important issue in each case is whether the charitable activity of disaster assistance is treated as a private benefit to the company that funded that company foundation. A second issue is whether the employees who received the disaster assistance from the company foundation have to treat that income as taxable wages. For many years, the IRS took the position that the benefit to a company from its foundation's disaster relief support for its employees was a private benefit that was more than incidental, and that meant that the grants were not permitted for the company foundation and would be treated as prohibited self-dealing. The September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks caused a reassessment of the service's position on disaster assistance from company foundations. So, since 2001, disaster assistance provided by a company foundation is not prohibited by these self-dealing provisions. And the legislative history makes it clear that an employer-controlled private foundation isn't providing an inappropriate benefit and isn't disqualified from 501c3 exemption if it makes the payments to an employee or a family member of an employee, so long as it meets 3 criteria. The legislative history provides the following guidance for implementing this general principle. If the payments in connection with a qualified disaster are made by a private foundation to employees, the company foundation will be presumed to be acting consistently with the requirements of 501c3 if 1. The class of beneficiaries is large or indefinite, 2. The recipients are selected based on an objective determination of need, and 3. The recipients are selected by an independent committee of the private foundation, a majority of the members of which are persons other than those who are in a position to exercise substantial influence over the affairs of the controlling employer. The presumption, of course, won't apply to grants made to or for the benefit of a disqualified person or a member of the selection committee. So disqualified persons and selection committee members can't receive grants from the company foundation. The legislative history makes it clear that other procedures and standards may be adequate substitutes to ensure that any benefit to the employer is incidental and tenuous. Similarly, providing need-based payments to employees and their survivors in response to a disaster other than a qualified disaster may also be treated as furthering a charitable purpose. So if a program doesn't fit with these strict requirements, they may nevertheless be allowed, but you'd need to check with the rules and the particular facts and circumstances. So circling back to another point mentioned a few minutes ago that is important for a company foundation that makes disaster relief payments. The rules allow the company foundation to make a payment and not treat it as wages to an employee only if the disaster is a qualified disaster, which is a term of art that means an event that results from terrorist or military actions, think mass shootings or wars, or an accident involving a common carrier, that is, planes, trains, boats, and buses, is a disaster declared by the U.S. President, or is an event that the Secretary of the Treasury determines is catastrophic. So that's 4 basic areas that qualify as a qualified disaster. Event from terrorism or military actions, an accident of a common carrier, a disaster declared by the U.S. President, or another event that's declared by the Secretary of the Treasury as catastrophic. So, to summarize, a new or existing charity, as well as private foundations established by businesses, can fundraise for and make gifts to disaster victims. The charitable organization providing relief follows the rules when the payments are consistent with its charitable purpose, and these boxes can be checked. 1, the class of beneficiaries is large or indefinite. 2, the recipients are selected based on an objective determination of need. And 3, the selection of recipients is made by an independent selection committee or adequate substitute procedures to ensure that any benefit to the donors, whether individuals or a company, is incidental and tenuous. The selection committee should consist of persons who are not family members of the recipients or in a position to exercise substantial influence over the affairs of the company in the case of a company foundation. Listeners who would like to hear more on the topic of disaster relief for nonprofits can find links in the show notes to IRS materials and other resources to help guide their way. For listeners who are interested in more information about how to apply for tax-exempt status on an expedited basis for a new charity formed in the aftermath of a specific disaster, this next episode 10 will cover that topic in detail. So that's all for this introductory episode on disaster relief. I'm Cynthia Rowland, and you've been listening to EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource, brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Farella, Braun & Martel. If you have suggestions for topics you would like for us to discuss, please email us at eoradioshow@fbm.com. That's eoradioshow@fbm.com. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, make a difference.